Yeah, we're live. 7:01. I missed it by 1 minute. I was trying to get through that stuff and get it up there so we can get it done on time. But sometimes you got to do what you got to do. Tonight we're going to look at a couple things. First of all, I've got a video up right now comparing different camshafts on actually two different supercharged combinations. They're both 6.2 liters, but it could have been done on 4.8, 5.3, 6.0s, whatever. In fact, the two were quite a bit different. One of them was a B15 crate motor with a Whipple on it, and the other one was an LS3 crate motor with a twin screw on it. Different sizes, and it wasn't a comparison between those two blowers, but more of a comparison and an illustration on what happens when you run different camshafts on these things. And the most interesting thing is, I mean, there were a lot of things, a lot of takeaways there. As we went up in better camshafts, the LSA camshaft is not as good as the LS9 camshaft, and then an aftermarket camshaft, obviously, not surprisingly, better than both the LSA or the LS9. The two most interesting camshafts tested on that combination, or those combinations for me, were actually the LS3 camshaft, because if you look at the comparison of the 5.3 when I ran all of the factory cams, and you look at the comparison done between the LS3 camshaft and the LS9 camshaft, for instance, on an NA 5.3, neither of which those cams were designed for, obviously. The LS9 wildly different because it was on a factory supercharged application, and the LS3 because it was on an all aluminum 6.2 liter with rec port heads. And as we know, a rec port headed camshaft can't work on cathedral port heads, right? But if you look at the comparison and what happened NA, again, if you guys are watching this channel, not surprisingly, we see a similar thing happening under boost and on a completely different combination. So the thing that's cool is that not only did I show you the power curves, the change in the power curves, but also the change in boost level. And a lot of times, if guys look at one or the other of those, they jump to the wrong conclusion. They think, especially if they look at the boost curve and go, "Oh well, this one made more boost here, and so it definitely needs to make more power, or it definitely should have made more power." But that's not the case, because we always, and I'm one of the people too. I'm one of the people. We correlate boost pressure with power output, and sometimes actually, and more often than not, this is what you want, especially on a supercharged application. Boost and power are inversely related. So if you can make the boost pressure go down while having the blower speed be the same, meaning that you didn't change the pulley, and you can have boost go down, power will go up. And that's a good sign. What you've done essentially, just you've made the combination more effective and more efficient, and therefore the pressure, or resistance, as I like to call it, is down and the power is up. That's a good thing. And a lot of guys think that it's from all the boost bleeding out because there's so much overlap. Well, I don't think any of these cams had very much overlap, if some of them, if any at all. Well, we know that some of the milder ones had no overlap at all. They had negative overlap. I don't think that even the 224 cam, I haven't actually done the specs, and I should have done that before I got on here to figure out, and maybe one of the guys online here can do the specs really quickly and figure out. I don't think that camshaft has any overlap either. It might, and if it does, it might only be a couple of degrees. And trust me, even if it had 10 degrees of overlap, it's not boost bleeding out. That's not why it lowered it. And so that's a cool correlation between what's happening with the boost and what's happening with the power. And then also the interesting thing is, if you look at the shape of the boost curves, we actually start out a little bit higher and then dip down, and then we rose up fairly rapidly toward the end. And that's not an unusual situation, and this is a positive displacement blower, and we often associate the thing just running kind of a consistent boost level. And it's been my experience that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen nearly as often as people think. In fact, with the right kind of turbo setup, I would argue that you could get a much flatter boost curve once the thing is up on the turbo. That the boost curve with control can be much flatter than we normally see with positive displacement stuff. We saw this on the little M90 Eaton. I've seen this many, many times on the Kenny Bell stuff, because we run those on a lot of things. The Whipple stuff. I haven't done any 2650 testing. I would like to, but even on an LSA or any of these blowers, we don't normally see a fixed boost curve. If the blower is too small, sometimes we can see a falling boost curve, which is not unusual. And we see the similar thing with the turbo too. If we were starting to run out of turbo, it cannot support the boost level for the NA power output, the combination of NA power output and boost level. It can't support that. So the boost just says, hey, look, I'm flowing as much as I can. Boost pressure is going to fall off. The power is either going to not climb or level off or decrease, depending on how rapidly that thing is falling off with RPM. So there's a lot of really good data there. And fast, thank you. I'm stuck on paper chat. I want a turbo a ramjet. Oh, sick week. Nice. A turbo ramjet would be cool. That's actually a pretty good intake manifold. I like those very much. I like the ramjet, and after running the Rochester fuel injection on a 327 that I did way back, I really like that manifold. I wish that I would have been around back in the days when guys were running those and we could have modified them. The thing definitely needed more throttle body and more injector and more feed and everything, but they have cured all of that by making it an EFI and making that ramjet deal. So that's a pretty efficient intake manifold. I like that stuff. And thanks again. So on the supercharged stuff, and the cool thing is it running, like I said, and before I got off on another tangent, we were talking about the LS3 camshaft, much milder than the LS9 camshaft, and the LS9 camshaft makes more power on the big end than the LS3 does, and we saw exactly that with the blower. And then the dedicated positive displacement blower cam for Brian Tooley Racing, again, no surprise, they know what they're doing, and that camshaft bigger than the LS9 camshaft definitely made more power. And on one of the applications, I should have revved it a lot higher. I mean, at 7,000 RPM, we would have seen a ton of extra power, and that would have been great. And then I showed the other cool thing was that running the NA camshaft on that combination, we saw that milder cam, but as an NA cam and an aftermarket cam, better than the factory stuff. So it was a good jump up in power, as we would expect and have seen, having tested that cam many times on an NA motor. It's worth quite a bit of power. And because it's worth quite a bit of NA power, we know what happens to the boost. The boost goes down if we improve the efficiency, but it added a bunch of power down low. And there were two things I brought up in that video. One is that if you want more power down low, don't put a positive displacement blower cam in, either an LSA or LS9, or maybe even an aftermarket cam like the very good Brian Tooley Stage 3 cam. If you want more low speed power, choose another one of their cams that's an NA version and run that. But the flip side to that is this thing was already making 650 or 700 foot-pounds in the area that we were testing it. So maybe more boost or maybe more torque there. Maybe that's not the answer. You know, you guys have to decide that, and traction might help decide that for you and stuff. And if you're roll racing out on the freeway and you're already going 100 and you need that there, it would definitely be beneficial. And a lot of guys like to spend more time below 6,000, racing around than they do above 6,000. So again, you would pick your camshaft, even on a supercharged combination, you would pick that for the thing that you want that motor to do in the RPM range that you want it to do. So lots of good stuff there. The next thing is, and I want you guys, when more people get here, we're gonna, and I'll bring this up again. But what I want to do is, if you were here last night, you saw that we talked about turbos, which is obviously one of my favorite subjects, and the discussion basically was, is there really a whole bunch of power in a really good turbo as compared to just your average turbo run at the same boost level on a combination where both of these turbos could support that? I mean, obviously, I know if you are trying to make 1,000 horsepower and you put a 700 horsepower turbo on it, that's not going to work out very well. And then you put 1,000 horsepower turbo on it, or better yet, a 1,200 horsepower turbo, and all of a sudden it makes 1,000 horsepower, and then, oh, look, this turbo is so much better. Well, yeah, it is. It's bigger. It works really well. So, but that got the phone ringing, and I had a lot of people comment about, well, yeah, definitely, I got this. You don't ever test good turbos, because I haven't tested Precision and Borg and Garrett, and I have tested those, but normally I test low dollar things, so that could be a valid point. But like I said, I've run that Precision, which is the most expensive turbo I've ever run, that 7675 CEA double throwdown, billet wheel thing. That was a big dollar turbo, and certainly very good in the range that turbo supports and the power. But again, like every turbo, that turbo is a 1,000 horsepower turbo, 11, 1,200 horsepower turbo, whatever power output that turbo can support. So probably more like a 1,200, I think, on that particular one. So I have run those. I have a Garrett. It's a small one that we ran on the Civic. I haven't run any big Garretts. I have run lots of Borg Warner turbos, S475s, S480s, and the like. And a lot of the other stuff that I've run, obviously, is like that GT45. But here's my thing, and this is what we're all gonna vote on this later on, not right now. So just put your pens down, put your mouse down, your clicker. I want to see what you guys think. I think the video that I'm going to do tomorrow is a call out to all of the turbo people. And this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell them, the video is essentially going to be me calling out all of the turbo people, all of the turbo manufacturers or suppliers or specialty people or whatever. I'm going to run the 3800 again like I did after we reconfigure it with the intake and ported heads and the right camshaft. We'll put it back together and prep it for big bang. And then I'm going to run it again with the GT45 at 15 pounds, or I mean, we ran it at 14.5, but we'll pick that number. It's going to be about 15 pounds. It's going to be 1 atmosphere, let's say. So I'll run that at 15 pounds, and that turbo will support whatever power level that is, because that motor at most NA. And again, this is how I view stuff. A lot of the turbo guys do not view turbo applications the way that I do. In fact, I would say that the vast majority of them don't even run them NA, which just frustrates me to no end. Well, we put this wheel on it, we did this, and it added this power. I'm like, yeah, but if you don't know, if you added 20 horsepower, 30 or 50 or whatever the number is from making this modification and change to the turbo, if you don't know what the NA power output is, you don't know that the turbo that you had on there before at the boost level that you were running that NA combination at, maybe you were below the formula and now you've only come back up to the formula. Maybe you're still not at the formula. The formula for me gives me an indication of how well things are working out. And that's why I like to have NA numbers before I have that. And I know that, you know, guys in the turbo community are going to say, yeah, but nobody that builds real turbo motors ever does that. We just put turbo motors together that we know everything about and we know that they work. And then we run turbos on them, and then we pick special turbo cams and turbo heads and turbo intake manifolds and turbo everything else. And then we run them and they make 1,000,000 horsepower. And in their defense, they do. There are lots of really good race applications out there where guys are doing that and making lots of power. But there's also all of these other guys over here, and those are the guys that I talk to. And those are the guys that have a combination. They have whatever that is, a 5-liter Ford, a small block Chevy, a big block, an LS, a Buick, a 3800, whatever it is, and they just want a turbo for it. Should they get can a $1,500 or $2,000 or $3,000 turbo make any more power at these reasonable boost and power levels compared to something cheap that a guy would get? Is that better thing actually a thing? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the video, and I'm going to the base turbo is going to be the GT45, the low buck GT45 that I've run hundreds of times on lots of different things. There's nothing special about it. It's not ideal for any particular combination. Obviously, I've run it on the K series Honda. I've run it on this. I've run it on a 4.8, a 5.3, a 6.0. I don't know if I've ever run it on a 6.2. I'd have to go back and look through my data and see. I've run it on a 454. I think we've run it on the little inline 6-cylinder. I think I ran that turbo on the 4200. I mean, I've run it on a lot of stuff. It's kind of the go-to turbo for most things, just starting out to figure out where we are with boost, and then we can go up to something bigger. So it's by no means ideal, not even for that 3800. I think it's a fairly good match for that thing. If I was only going to run 600 horsepower, I'd pick a smaller one because I want it to be more responsive. So it's by no means ideal. So my call out to them is going to be, look, here's the baseline turbo. It doesn't have the optimum cam for that turbo or the optimum heads or the optimum intake or the optimum anything, because I know I'm going to get that when I talk, and I'll be talking about all this tomorrow. Because guys, what they're going to do is I'm going to ask them to send turbos, and I will T4 turbos, and I will run them whatever compressor you want, whatever wheel you want, as long as it's a T4 and it bolts on there and we can run the exhaust out, then all that will be fine. And I know invariably what people are going to do. Well, this turbo needs this camshaft. No, it doesn't. But this turbo needs this kind of cylinder head. That intake to exhaust flow is just wrong for this turbo. No, it's not. Oh, well, my turbo needs this kind of intake manifold. No, it doesn't. Those are not specific to your turbo. And again, I know I can see it already and know people are going to say that's what's going to make this awesome. And what I'm hoping is that I get a few different turbos. I'd like to get 4 or 5 of them or whatever, and be able to run, because the nice thing about turbos is, other than them being really hot for a really, really long time, so that when you go to swap them out, it's hot. But it would be cool to run a bunch of T4 turbos on there. And I have some that I'm going to run. Like I even want to run that T6 Summit turbo. I want to run that S475. That's a T6 because it has a really big hot side. And I'd kind of like to see what that's going to do. Also, I have the T4 S475, which is a lot more rare, I think, for regular people. I have the S480 that I can borrow from Freiburg. I'm sure he'd let me use it. I have this VS Racing 7875, this one here that I just have in my room, because you gotta have a turbo in your room, which is kind of awesome. I have that one. We have some smaller ones too from the guys at Max Speeding. So there's a lot of stuff to choose from, and it will be interesting to see how these things respond, and especially if we can run them, at the same boost level and see what they do. Same air fuel, same timing, yada yada yada. And we will monitor, we'll monitor temperature coming out. I think I'll monitor, rather than monitor the temperature going into the motor, which will be intercooled. I think that's probably going to would probably be fairly consistent. That's going to be more of a function of the starting temperature. But it'd be interesting, I think, to measure the temperature maybe before and after. Boost is always your friend. Yes, thank you, Fast. Measure the temperature before and after the intercooler. We will monitor back pressure because we want to be able to correlate some kind of change in power with something else that happened. And that's always my question when somebody tells me, oh yeah, we gained 50 horsepower from this. Okay, well, what changed? If you're telling me that the air fuel is the same and the timing is the same and the boost pressure is the same, something changed. The back pressure had to change. That is one of the things. The mass flow had to change. So if you were actually measuring airflow, and that's the other thing that I was thinking about doing, is maybe I can configure in the turbos. It's going to depend on how different the inlets are on all these turbos, but maybe I can configure a way to run an elbow and then run the air turbine on it, so we can get some airflow numbers, which I think would be definitely beneficial. Because then if we see a change in airflow and we see a change in power, those things should obviously correlate. If we don't see a change in airflow and we see a change in power, then we would look to something else. Then we probably would look to back pressure, and then we'd also look closely at temperature and look at all that stuff and see what's going on. But that's kind of what I'm thinking. And because I would like to see, I want that to be the case. I want there to be, like at 15 pounds with this NA power output, I want to see different turbos be able to do different things. Like I want to see magic wheels. I want to see magic compressor wheels or magic turbine wheels. I want to see something do something better. And then the other thing we would look at, and this is going to be a little bit harder on the engine dyno, is if we do see something where something maybe is a little better at the peak or in the middle or wherever it is, I want to see if there's a change in response rate. So are we trading response rate for maybe better power on the big end? So is it like a clipped wheel situation where we've improved the hot side flow or something? I want to be able to correlate all that stuff and talk intelligently about it, because if there is a difference, which I'm fully hoping that there is, I'll be surprised if it's very much, but I want it to be a lot. And if it is, that will be great, because then this is all a learning process for us. So it basically is, yes, it's GT45 versus the world. And we want to see, can anybody take down the mighty GT45, which, as we know, is the high water mark of all turbos in existence, because it's a couple $100, and it works very well. So, and then it'll answer the question: is boost? If we run 15 pounds from that turbo and run 15 pounds from another turbo, is that all the same? And, at that power level, is there really a change? Can we really affect it at just one more atmosphere of boost, and at that kind of power level? I don't know. I would think that, like a lot of things, I think that the greater the power output and the boost pressure that we would test it at, the more of a gain we could see. Like if we test something on 1,000 horsepower motor, getting a gain or a change of 50 horsepower, I think is not unreasonable. If we're testing something at 100 horsepower and getting a 50 horsepower change, that's a lot harder to do it. And so I think that we have a sliding curve there, given the amount that we're making versus the change that would be reasonable to expect. But that's just me. So, and maybe there is something there. I kind of want to see that. So that probably will be the video for tomorrow. That's kind of what I'm leaning to. Area 51 contaminated everything. Let's see. The turbo hot side makes such a difference, and I'm sure I'm going to get that also. I'm going to get that my turbo needs a specific divided Y pipe that's coated and wrapped and has this kind of merge and just all of that kind of stuff. Are there any oil pressure losses with turbo applications over NA setups? Do you still choose the same oil pump? I normally do. When we put turbos on, I don't change the oil pump. If I was running twins, I might think about a different oil pump. Will a 2.2 liter spool GT45? Well, it would with 100 shot of nitrous, right? We know that it would do that. Gregory, I got a pair of S366s you can use at Jason's. Okay, cool. Are they actually Garrett's? Oh no, that's a Borg Warner, right? Yeah, I had the GT. The Garrett that I have is for the Sprint. And the interesting thing is that when apparently David Vizard is watching this stuff because he heard me mention the Sprint and said that he and I got to read this to you. This is awesome. He wants to do the Sprint cylinder head, which is cool. The 3-cylinder Metro 2-valve head has a bunch of potential. While in Australia, I met a guy who claimed his 1,000cc 3-cylinder turbo Metro engine was cranking out 244 wheel horsepower. I don't know if it was, but he went by my 4-cylinder 1,300cc version that had 200 wheel horsepower, about the way you'd expect with 40 more extra horsepower. so David, I had no idea that he was dabbling in the Sprint stuff. So that's kind of cool. We did a little bit of porting to that head already. Fred from AccuFab did a little, and I was looking for fuel mileage when we did this, so I wasn't looking for power so much. But it would be interesting to see that we got a bunch of low lift flow gains and did mostly valve job stuff on the Sprint head, but it definitely needs a camshaft and things to get it to make power. Chicago style is way better than New York pizza. I don't think that I haven't found really too many bad kinds of pizza. I'm the where I draw the line though is I don't like sauce on top of the cheese. The sauce that has to be like the dough and then the sauce, and then the cheese, and then obviously all the toppings. I don't like the other stuff outside. That's just me, though. Turbo Tuesday. Mike, for me, industrial hull sets. I've used hull sets. The guys from HP Performance, that's what they sent me were hull sets. And I think in looking now at my storage, I may have a couple of turbo kits that I need to get rid of. And I can't remember what they're for. I need to look. I think I have complete like jet hot coated exhausts and everything. I'll figure out what they're for, and then you guys can let me know if somebody might want those. How do you think a truck Norris cam would perform in an LT style engine? They don't offer an LT version of that cam yet, so but they have other good, really good LT cams. Should someone consider larger oil capacity pans and running superchargers or turbos? Not necessarily. Because the flow rate through the turbo and the blower shouldn't evacuate the pan. You'd be looking at that. You need to look more at the drain back on the engine for something like that. Modern G series Garrett and EFR Borg Warner turbos come into their own in throttle response, but you can't really test on the engine out. Yeah, we can't. And those might be better on a transient deal. Maybe on the chassis dyno. When will we see the 3800 back on the dyno after we do all the things to it? GT45 versus an eBay $2,800 billet, $280 billet, $78.75 versus an eBay $300 HX60 whole set copy, a 73 millimeter. Oh, by the way, the HX60 is a T6 plan. Now, see, I have a T6 conversion. I have the 3-inch V-band to T6. So the way I have the turbo configured, the turbo kit on the 3800 configured, I think I can run a T6 on it. Yeah, I don't. This test isn't about throttle response. That's not a good thing to do on the engine dyno. Obviously, there are limitations to what we could do on the engine dyno. I can't test off idle wide open throttle stuff like some people want for some reason. But we can test power through the curve, and so as long as we test them with the same exhaust gas temperature or something, we can see some kind of response rate. If there's a big change in response, we'll see that in the curve, but not a transition thing like that. But I'm more concerned with at 15 pounds at the power peak and the torque peak and in the area where we're running this thing, can we see a change in power there just from a change in whatever the turbo is doing? I don't think I've tried anything with an HX55. Brad, I'm new to this, but is it possible to have a turbo that will spool early and support 650 to 700 horsepower? It is on the right size motor. Yep, Shannon, I'm here to make sure you don't make mistakes and to save you money. Maximum power sprint. I know it does need. I don't know how much it can make though. If somebody was making 244 at the tire, that'd be a lot. I've never made anywhere near that. I don't think the GT40. I don't think the sprint motor would spin a GT45. You did a fluff and buff. Yes, on the sprint cylinder head, it definitely was that. Extra sauce. Yeah, I'm all for that. Extra sauce, extra pepperoni, extra sausage. All of that's good. It's just that I don't want, and I'm actually not a fan of pesto pizza either. My wife loves it and the boys like it, but that's not for me. Melvin, what is your question? Sprint spool on a GT45 with a 200 shot of nitrous. That'd be a big shot on a motor that only makes 70 horsepower. The engine that's in the Sprint is it does. There's no engine in the Sprint. I only have the engine out of the Sprint. I don't have the Sprint anymore. It got stolen. But the engine is a 1-liter 3-cylinder Sprint motor turbo. The compressor wheel in the GT45 is bigger than the Sprint piston. It probably is. Yeah, no anchovies for me. If they're for a small buck Chevy, I'm interested in pricing. Just put a small turbo to spool the GT45. Now, see, Morty, that's exactly what I did. I ran the Sprint motor as a compound set. It was the first one that I ever did, actually. So we ran the factory turbo, and then I also ran, I need to go back and look at my photos. It was either that little Garrett or it was the factory 1.8 turbo VW turbo that we ran as a compound. I would like the max horsepower for the GT45 on the 3800 versus max on a 5.3 liter LS. Richard, in theory, do you think that the reverse pattern cam would have given you more boost and less power? I think it would have made less power at any given boost level than the other standard pattern cam that we were running because it made less NA power. So we can extrapolate that from that pretty well. I ain't no punks in the house. I didn't even see. Oh, there he is. Hey, Richard. Hey, what's up, man? Hopefully you're feeling good. I think that the 3800 will get to the maximum of that GT45. I think it will make 700 to 800. I think it will get there. Melvin, I was asking your opinion on a 289, 289, 110, 570 lift max RPM. Do you know what the duration is at 50? I can probably get an idea. Let's see here. I won't know exactly unless you know, but so 289 is going to be in the high 230s, low 240s, probably. That's a pretty big camshaft. I'm hoping that you don't have a stock short block because you probably don't have enough piston to valve clearance for that. So I would be leery of that. But on a 6-liter with that cam, and it depends on what intake manifold you have for RPM too. The camshaft is not the only thing that determines maximum RPM. 570 lift should be fairly stable for RPM, but where it's going to make power is going to be a function of how much head flow you have and what the runner length is on the intake manifold. Of a 6-liter LS that has a Gen 4 rods, 243 heads, and springs, BTR Stage 4 twin turbo cam, Trailblazer SS, and twin 64mm turbos. What can I expect for a safe amount of power? Did you put that camshaft in there because you wanted a lot of chop in it? Because that's way more camshaft than you need in that combination. How about separate oiling systems? So you're going to have a different oil pump and reservoir and stuff for that? I don't think that's necessary for turbos. GT45 starts spooling at 2500 on my setup. Nice, that's pretty low. 1989 tune port, 354 gears, full exhaust, first TPI, fuel upgrades, and tune on the factory cam. You're not going to gain hardly anything going to better heads with a factory camshaft. The gains will be minimal. You need to have more motor to be able to get anything from the cylinder heads. Rick Bo's right. Can you tell me what all the numbers mean for turbos? They're different, just different size turbos. These are all names that have been applied to these turbos. And for like S475, that's a designation by Borg Warner for a specific turbo or a specific class of turbos. GT45 is also a name given by Garrett to their turbos and then adopted by a lot of the offshore ones because it was a cool name and it sells very well and people look it up. So for us, like a GT45 is like a 750 horsepower turbo, and an S480 is like a 1200 horsepower turbo. The idea of this test on a 5.3 doing a handful of S400 base turbos would really get me spooled up. Should I put a responsive turbo on my 5.3 with a short runner intake to help down low? The responsive turbo would help down low. The short runner intake will kill low speed power. That's better for top end. Dan, that's harsh, man. Somebody saw it because it was full of awesomeness. Yeah, if you know Rick Bo's rides, if you are looking for a turbo, this is a good place. There's lots of guys that can tell you what size you need to put in there for whatever power output you want. Do you still have the transaxle for the Sprint? I bet Kenny Products makes an adapter to bolt it to a VW transaxle. You can put it in a fiberglass dune buggy. I don't think I have the trans. You don't have to look. I don't think I do. Stage 3 twin turbo cam still is big for a 5.3 or it's a 6.0, right? It's still for those turbos and that power level that those turbos are going to support. You don't really need that much cam. They do need the Sprint does need I don't even think it needs a 2/3 race cam. I think it needs a 1/3 race cam. Corsair guy, I'll stop trying and dyno with the intake and carb. I'll leave my LSXRT at home. Did you have a question before that I missed? I ran a 50-60 shot on my Sprint. That would wake that thing up a lot. I mean, it would essentially double the power output. Somebody stole it from a shop, so it was somebody that was doing it specifically because of awesomeness, because of jealousy. The GT45 versus a similar size Garrett GTX or G series. That's the thing. A GT45 compared to a Garrett GT45 would be a loss by about 500 horsepower. The Sprint would get over 50 miles to the gallon. Dirty Mike and the boys. That's good. I like that. It's pretty funny stuff. They stole it and then sold it to a wrecking yard and got whatever the cash that the wrecking yard gives you for that thing. And I think it probably was an inside job because they obviously didn't have a pink slip or anything for it. I have an L83 with headers, 410 gears. What cam and intake do you recommend? The intake that's on there is pretty good. You could use the L86 intake manifold. Take a look at talk to the guys at Brian Tooley. They've done a bunch of stuff. They have a really good cam for that. I would like to make 1,300 horsepower. It's a ZZ502 and a 67 Camaro. So I don't know if a single S480 or an S485 probably would do that. Although twin GT45s would be cool in that. GT1544. The it's either a GT20 or a 22, because I think that we were looking to do 250 or something like that horsepower. Should I put a responsive turbo in my 5.3 with a short runner intake to help down low? You just responded to this. Those are different things. The short runner intake, if you have a short runner intake and you're trying to improve response down low, then a smaller turbo will help that. But those two things are at odds. Overbuilt. How about the sloppy mechanic cam for the LS guys? I've tested both the sloppy stage 2 and then the new best cam. We've tested those obviously, and those work good. What turbo is the 78, 75 based off of? Does somebody know out there? Where's the Buick 455 project? That's going to go back together as a stage 1 455. Trying to increase acceleration feel. What are the downsides of just going to a shorter gear? A shorter gear will help. I'm going to dyno at West Tech next month. I'd like you there to tune my LSX RT. Interested. I'm not the guy you want tuning that. You want Eric and Ish tuning it. Those guys are real tuners. I tune my stuff that I don't care about. I saw a Sprint on Facebook Marketplace the other day with an LS4 swapped in the back. That should be a wheelie machine. I don't know if it's a GT2056 or not. I'd have to go back through all of my notes and see which one it is. Yeah, Scott, those are good starting points. Whoever does a 5.3, the stock truck cams when turbo will kill your engine. I don't know why that would be the case. I've run lots of turbos with stock cams. The Shogun was very cool. All right, I ain't no punk. I love seeing you guys. I got to drive home now. I'll check you guys out tomorrow. Thanks, man. Stay safe. Red, big dumb flares on the Sprint. Man, don't ever disrespect a Chevy Sprint. I've seen you comment the stock cams are so torquey the internals will break. You haven't seen me comment that. I've never said that. I don't know who. Maybe that's for somebody else. But it would be not unusual to take a stock cam and put another cam in it and make a lot more power at the same boost level, because cams will make more power than the stock cam. And the stock cam is fairly responsive, but you can get a Truck Norris cam or a torque cam to be almost the same response, maybe even better. You know, you'd have to see. So nothing about that makes sense to me. Richard, I'm running flat top pistons and a carburetor on my 6-liter. The valves are clearing with 862s. That's good. Then what camshaft are you running in that? Mike, you saw somebody trying to B20 swap a Sprint. It's pretty narrow. It's really narrow. If I built a dune buggy with 36 horsepower VW motor for the Salt, would you drive it? You want to drive a dune buggy at Bonneville? That doesn't seem very aerodynamic. A Chevy Sprint with an LS4 in it. Handling that could be best described as diabolical. Eric, the reason I asked about oiling is a friend said 2050 oil is recommended for his twin turbo LS. I don't know why you'd run 2050. We normally run 530 stuff in the LS. Dan, I thought about your turbo thing last night. If you had 7 pounds but 15 pounds of back pressure, wouldn't it be make more horsepower than 7 pounds and 5 pounds of back pressure? Yeah, it would. And we talked about that a little bit. And that would be one of the things. And you get into that when you have a sizing problem with the turbo, either the hot side or the cold side. So if the cold side won't support the power level, obviously it's not going to work very well. If you start running out of hot side and haven't totally run out of hot side, but you get to a point where you start having a lot more back pressure than boost pressure, that turbo I don't think is going to work as well as one that would have less back pressure. It will be more responsive, but what will actually happen? Like if you have one turbo that has, instead of having it be off that skewed that much, let's say we had one turbo that had 15 pounds of boost and it had 20 pounds of back pressure. And then you had one that had 15 pounds of boost and only had 15 pounds of back pressure. So you had 1-to-1 and then more than 1-to-1. Let's say we had 1.5-to-1. Which one of those is going to make more power? Is that enough to make a difference? I mean, if one of them is 15 pounds of boost and 30 or 40 pounds of back pressure, we would expect to see a difference there. But what happens in the kind of sweet spot area? Would we really see a change? Those are all good questions. Melvin, 289, 570, 110. 289 is not the at 50 number, right? That's the advertised duration. I'm guessing. If it's 289 at 50, that's a really big cam. It's probably more like 239 at 50. Remember the first gen RX-7 that had, that they put 2 engines in? The Sprint and the Geo Metro also is a good candidate for motorcycle swaps. Guys have done that for Bonneville a lot. Yes, the Twin Paula, they did a dual motor deal. And the two motor thing has been done before. A turbo boost Sprint would be insane. Something for VS Racing needs to go on the 3800. It will. I'll run the 7875 Gen 2 motor from Byron. That's definitely going to go on there. I thought that we talked about that before. Grooves and Lands. I made 475 wheel horsepower with a 2JZ with stock cams, heads, and a 66 millimeter turbo. Torque peak 5,000, horsepower peak 5,500. Torque falling fast. The T4068 is fairly tight on the hot side. Turbine or cams holding me back. I think it's probably both. I would have a better idea if you could tell me what the back pressure is, but certainly the stock cam, head, and intake that wants to make peak power there. Like where does that 2JZ make peak power NA? If it only makes peak power at less than 6,000, that's what the curve is going to be like, unless you can produce some sort of rising boost curve on that. A 66 millimeter 475, 570, 66 millimeter should support more than that. There's a guy from Canada that has one that ran something like 98 miles an hour. I have some ideas how to make it go 120 in a dune buggy. We need to find someone who could test the back pressure. We can test back pressure on the dyno. Let's see here. Dale Richard, it has been found on stock bottom ends and LS engines, or really any stock bottom end engine for that matter. Keeping the torque out at lower RPMs helps keep the engine together. Yeah, and that's a function of controlling the boost. And you can do that with timing. And you can also do that with intake runner length. I mean, there's a lot of ways that you can do that. But take a look at the big bang stuff. And so when you're talking about keeping torque out of the bottom end, a stock cam is not the thing that you worry about. That's not going to add more bottom end, at least not in the horsepower ranges that we need to talk about. Because if you're running a stock camshaft, you're not going to be making 1,500 horsepower and 1,300 foot-pounds, because you won't do that with a stock cam. So the stock cam is not the limiting factor for an LS in terms of low speed power and torque production, where you have to start being concerned about the power potential or the power, like the capacity of the engine. That's not a concern. You're way past that. Have you ever tried an On3 88 millimeter turbo versus a GT45? No, an 88 millimeter would be a lot bigger than a GT45. Turbos of similar size will all make similar horsepower. I see. I'm told that that's not the case. I'm told that there's some secret magic stuff that I don't know about. Can you utilize wastegates to have more boost pressure than manifold drive pressure? Yes and no. Usually the back pressure is a function of what's going on with the power output of the motor relative to the size of the hot side of the turbo and a few different things. I have been told that guys that are running class regulations where they have to run a specific turbo, and they get to the limits of that turbo, usually both the compressor side and the turbine side. Ideally, if they know what they're doing, they try to get the limit of both of those. And if they have really high back pressure, they can open another wastegate to help bleed some of that. And they do that after, obviously, the turbo is spooled up. But I haven't ever tried that, and so I can't swear by that. Let's see. What are the $150 eBay turbos copied off of? I don't know which one you're talking about. The hot side AR will determine the power curve. The NA motor will determine the power curve. Let's see. Originally a non-turbo VVTi, but has had the turbo rods piston swapped in. Uh, 19 clutch. You're up. Well, late. I guess early, really, technically. Did you see that Eric tested the torque link intake? It actually wasn't bad. Did he test it on the dyno, or did he just flow test it? Richard, we need to have literally all the data you can. Maybe give us a second segment with extra detail on the next video just to see. What do you mean? In the video, I need to do an outtakes one or something? Steven, I bought an SN95 Mustang with an LS, the Gen 4 LS, twin 62 millimeters, 243 heads, Trailblazer. I had a stage 4 BTR NA cam, but I replaced it with another BTR cam. What do you recommend? If you're going to replace it with another cam, the Truck Norris cam would be really good for that. Those are fairly small turbos, and that combination, you'd be much happier. It just says Gen 4 LS. I don't know what size it is. If it's a 4.8 or 5.3, I'd put a small cam in it because it's going to be more responsive for the turbos, and it won't be limiting in any way for you to max those turbos out. Flow bench tested it. The Summit dual plane beat all other intakes. The problem with the flow bench and especially a dual plane intake manifold, it tells me almost nothing. Well, I shouldn't say nothing. It does tell you something, but it doesn't tell you what the power it's going to produce, though. Can you do a video on compressor maps compared to dyno results at different boost pressures? Since you're not afraid to send high boost like most, I don't run high boost on almost anything except for the big bang stuff. Full telemetry along with combustion pressure readings. Sure, I'll just go out and get those sensors because those are really inexpensive. Westech let you do a durability test for an hour to compare cheap turbos versus spending ones. Running a turbo at wide open throttle for an hour is not going to test the turbo. It's going to test the motor and the cooling tower also. I've never run a Pulsar turbo either. Not that I can remember. Let's race dynos. Exactly. You need to race cars, right? The best thing to do is like, and I like the stuff that Eric does, and I like anybody that flow benches stuff, but it's better to have flow bench data and then correlate that with power data. And then ideally, if you can, correlate that then with drag strip data. That would be the best like scenario. A lot of times we can't do all of that. I don't know that you need to change your 64 millimeter turbos. I don't know how much, I don't know what your goal is. I don't know how much power you want to make. And if you told me what the power is, then we could correlate a combination for you that would do what you want. Is there a cost-effective way to measure turbo assembly RPM during this comparison test? You want me to measure impeller speed? There's no way for me to do that effectively. Wide open throttle for an hour. Can any motor handle that? Yeah, there are lots of motors that will do that. They do them for 24 hours. And when I say that, I heard myself saying that, and I've never seen them do that. I've been told that they do that, and I don't know how they do that, because you'd run out of fuel, right? Unless I guess they have a huge tank, and then how do they have that much cooling and stuff? But I'm told that the OEMs do that, and the guys from Volkswagen told me that they did that. They said we ran it for 24 hours. I'm like, why would you do that? And it's a turbo motor. So you want me, Admiral, are you wanting me to do this thing live? Because that's not going to happen. There's just not, like, the signal in Westech is not nearly good enough to do that. But I have all of that data. I have O2, I have EGTs, I have all that stuff. Well, I want to have EGTs. I guess we could hook that up. When I was at GM Racing, we flogged LSAs for 5 hours, alternating between peak torque and peak RPM. I've seen cycles like that. Fast, what are you doing? How about a modern version of a Golden Gator? What is a Golden Gator? Oh, there you go. Yeah, if you're generating electricity and sending it back to the grid, that's a really good way to go. Do you differentiate between preload that compresses a suspension spring even with the wheels and tires in the air versus the preload, the compression of the suspension spring under the weight of the car? Were we asking how that affects boost? Did you see the Sick Week 1320 video where it split the LS block when the gate didn't open, 80 pounds of boost, electric gate failure? The one that I saw was the PFI Speeds Honda that did that, and it wasn't an LS. If there's an LS one, I haven't seen it. Let's see. No, I mean, when we do the video on the Big Bang, we need a second segment called the data segment, and we can watch everything go crazy, and maybe someone can pinpoint exactly what failed. You're not going to be able to see that from the data, because you can't see inside the motor. We can't see a rod failure from data, at least not that I know of. But we can look at the data. And how the failure happened. Yeah, I don't know how somebody can determine that. If you have a broken piston and a broken rod, can you determine which one happened first? Yeah, the Honda Split, I mean, the cool thing is the head was still connected to the portions of the block with the head stud. So the head studs did their job. Just the block was not strong enough. I mean, if we can see coolant pressure, I normally don't have coolant pressure. We can see oil pressure, definitely. Banks filmed some testing at Amsoil for a carb 350 being run for 24 hours on engine dyno at different loads. Was interesting, and the engine lived. It wouldn't surprise me that they could run. I mean, we ran a motor for a minute and a half with no oil, so I think that they should have no troubles lasting for 24 hours, right? Is there a pressure sensor in the coolant system? We don't run. I don't run a pressurized coolant system. There's very little pressure in the block. Needed an ARP block. That's good. Points for that. Grooves, the GM Ecotech 4-cylinder has head bolts and main bolts straight in line. The drag engines drill all the way through and use long studs that hold the main and heads together. That's nice. So everything's going. Are you planning on doing it with the VS Racing Gen 3 7875? I only have a Gen 2 in the future. It's been out for a while, but still hardly nothing on YouTube on the new one. I only have the Gen 2 one. And again, I don't know how much of it. Byron would know more than anybody, I would hope. He should know what the difference between the Gen 3 and the Gen 2 is, and if the Gen 3 is even better. Oh, glad you made it home, man. You really want a skinny 917 with a long tail? I do like those. Especially if it's the Sunoco one. Most responsive turbo for an LS1, it'd be something small. How do you monitor back pressure? We have we drill and tap the exhaust before the turbo, and then we run a what is like a compression fitting. It's a flare fitting like a brake, and we run aluminum tubing. You can also use copper, and they run the spiral of aluminum tubing back to the back of the dyno, and then we run a line off of that's rubber because the air will cool that. Will probably cool the tube down enough that it doesn't melt the tube, and then we connect that to the pressure sensor. Let's see. I think it'd be awesome for other back-to-back tests. Maybe if the cooling tower is 5 degrees warmer for a second run and the motor makes 5 more horsepower. If the water in the motor is 5 degrees warmer, it won't make more power. It'll make less. The only thing that helps it make more power is if the turbo has more temperature in it. But normally the motor runs best with the oil being hot and the motor being cold. How about using a Borg-Warner turbo, a 72 or 76? We have those. Have you used the Dodge replicas, the HX35s? I have not. Lots of comments about Smoky Eunuch. Ever mess with cylinder pressure sensors? I haven't. I've seen them and I've seen data from them, but I've never run them. If you pick up a J series, I'm probably going to get a J32, I'm thinking. So Groove said that he's done some testing with piezoelectric in-cylinder pressure transducers. I've seen some that are they're in the spark plugs. So if you have Borg-Warner turbos, are you ever going to use them? I use them all the time. The S475s are used as twins on the Big Bang motors, both of the 6 liters, and I run those things like extensively. Would there be any advantage of running an air-to-air intercooler and also an air-to-water? Yes, there would be. If you can twinner cooled it, that's what I call it. I would run the air-to-air first because then it could take out fairly big chunks because you want a big change in temperature, and then run an air-to-water to do the secondary cooling is the way that I would do it. Oh, SXE Borg-Warners, not the old stuff. Did you see when Project Farm ran an engine without oil for like an hour without an oil on Lucas stabilizer? They couldn't have done that at wide open throttle. I thought guys were using the cylinder pressure sensor for critical part of tuning, not for what I'm doing. Maybe at the OEM level where they can afford that kind of stuff. I would look for a J35. I know I'd like to have a bigger one. I'd like to have a J37. What I don't want is I don't want one of the J series that have the common head, the common exhaust manifold deal. I don't want that. I won't pick a motor like that. We might be able to put the earlier heads on the J35. I'd like the motor to be a 3.5 liter rather than a 3.2, and ideally a 3.7. I don't really care about the later higher compression stuff, but like I said, I'm not going to run one that has that common outlet for the exhaust. Project Farm ran a Briggs at governed speed with 0 load. Yeah, that makes more sense. I've seen that stuff a lot. You can run those motors on water. If you run water through them and lubricate them, that nothing will happen because there's no load on them. I've seen that's what they used to do with the what was all the snake oil that people used to sell, Slick 50 and all those things, and then they would sprinkle dirt in it, and yeah, there's no load on it. It's just spinning around. It's not doing anything. How much pressure drop would there be when running both air to air and air to water? Not if they were sized correctly, you would get very little drop from a loss in flow, but you would get temperature drop. You would get pressure drop from the temperature drop. The chili bomb, yes, we definitely got. Prolong is the other one, yeah. The chili bomb definitely needs to be tested, and it will be tested. I've seen a ProCharge alcohol Hemi survive a full 1/8 mile pass with 0 oil pressure on Lucas stabilizer. I love Tom and I love the guys at Lucas. We do stuff with them all the time. I don't know that a stabilizer can make that happen. The chili bomb is the little cheap air to water intercooler. I've not, Zach, and yours will be the last question for tonight. I've got to get going. I've not run any draw through turbo stuff, but I need to because it's really cool. Dubai's in the house. Nice. That's awesome. I would like to do a draw through setup. I'm trying to think back. I thought that Ken Croce may have had one of those on the Pontiac. Maybe. or that it could have been like the Martin system where the carburetor draws into the turbo and then blows into the lower part of the manifold too. I can't remember now. I should have photographed it and stuff, and I didn't. This was back in the day before even YouTube. We were doing that, but that would have been cool. But I would like to set up a carburetor in front of the turbo and just have it blow in, because that would be kind of cool. Kyle, my I know I said that was the last one. My D15 made 150 wheel horsepower. That's a lot for a D15. Made 300 wheel horsepower at 15 pounds. That's kind of what we would expect. At a TO446, stage 2 exhaust wheel, 6.3 turbine, fabbed on a 58 millimeter T4, 0.84 turbine, still made 300 wheel horsepower. Lots of lag, magic turbos. Yes. I want them to be magic. I want there to be magic. I so badly want there to be magic, and I want somebody to show me the magic. So I hope that they do. So hopefully that turbo test will come out, and hopefully people will respond to the video, and you guys will get to see all that tomorrow. Thanks for showing up. I'm gone for tonight, but I'll be back tomorrow. Thanks, guys.